The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. Today's guest is an old friend and repeat guest of NDE Radio's PMH Atwater. On last week's show, she discussed her intriguing new book, The Forever Angels, Near-Death Experiences in Childhood and Their Lifelong Impact. You can listen to that show by hitting the NDE Radio's Past Shows button and all of our past shows as well. In fact, I think PMH was last on May 15th of 2017. You can find that show as well. PMH Atwater is a multiple near-death experiencer and has been researching near-death states since 1978. She's authored 18 books on the subject. PMH, welcome back again to NDE Radio.
Well, it's a privilege to be here.
Well, yes. It's a privilege for us to have you. Let's go on with the Forever Angels for a bit, and then I have another direction to lead you off into.
No, here.
one of the most fascinating things I thought in your talk that you gave at the conference in Philadelphia was the discussion of the vagus nerve, and perhaps you could elaborate on all of that.
Well, there's a lot of theory and ideas about the silver cord that idea that somehow, some way, our body is attached to our soul through a silver cord, and you read about this a lot in psychic books, metaphysical books, esoteric books, the fabled silver cord. And one of the things that troubled me in all of this research that I've been doing since 1978, I have a research base of nearly 5,000 adults and children, is very few ever talked about a silver cord. They didn't see any kind of cord. And so that just kind of bothered me, and until I fell off a ladder. I did. I went flying in the air and fell off of a ladder and had an experience with the vagus nerve myself. And then I went back over my research and discovered the clue is in the breath. The clue is in the breath. It could. I'm not going to say it could. I'm going to correct myself. I truly feel that the vagus nerve is the physical component to the silver cord. And I get that mainly from breath. Children, little bitty ones especially, will talk about being in a lake or a stream or the bathtub, and they don't need to breathe. They'll go walking along, no breath. Don't need that breath. And, of course, eventually they do, but they can cover a lot of territory without breath when they're underwater. And I noticed with my own son, he would go to a swimming pool, and then he would walk across the bottom of it. He wouldn't be swimming on the top. He'd be walking the bottom of it. And it's us, his parents, who would panic and, dive in there and bring him out. But it didn't bother him at all. And so I'm seeing this not only with children, but also with adults, especially after their experience. They'll go through periods of time, even fairly long periods of time, not breathing. And I did the same thing after my third near-death experience. And so I finally timed myself. And I think it was about somewhere between 7 to 10 minutes. I don't remember for sure. I was driving in downtown traffic in Boise, Idaho, and no breath. And I didn't need that breath. And I finally caught on over the years this business of breathing. And so, I really spent a lot of time with near-death experiencers, invariably adult or child. They would talk about periods of time, especially after their experience, when they would notice that they weren't breathing, and they're going about regular activities, maybe driving, maybe at work, whatever, and they didn't need that breath. And so finally I put two and two together and thought, if you're injured in any way, the vagus nerve takes over. It doesn't matter about your nose, your nostrils, and normal breathing. The vagus nerve takes over, and it breathes for you, and it does not breathe out of the lungs. It's a very different type of breathing. And so I think, bingo, we've got something here. It's the vagus nerve that is the physical component to the silver cord.
Yeah. That's so interesting to me because, I drowned at age 7, and then later on in life was diagnosed with sleep apnea because for long periods of time at night when I was asleep, I wasn't breathing. And so I use a CPAP machine now, but perhaps that was a result of my
a lot
NDE.
of child 67% of these children have problems with sleeping. So it says that same kind of thing. We're going back to the breath.
Interesting. Wow. I think you told me this was a couple of years ago, and we were having lunch together, and you said that I think in that incident you had timed yourself at 8 minutes without breathing.
Yeah, I think that 7 to 10 minutes. I can't remember for sure.
Long. Yeah, I mean, I was astounded, because.
Oh yeah, I went down Vista Boulevard in Boise, Idaho. I'm headed toward the Capitol. I take a left on State Street. I'm going down. This is heavy traffic going down State Street, and it finally occurred to me, I've not been breathing all this time. My lungs are not working. Maybe I should pull my car over to the side, stop it, and restart my lungs. So I did that through prayer and visualization. But I was able to restart my lungs. But that kind of concerned me that I was doing all of this without breathing.
Well, they say, as a former EMT, I was always trained that, 6 minutes without oxygen and your brain starts to die.
Well,
but apparently there's a factor that they have not taken into account anyway.
Well, I don't think we know enough about the vagus nerve. I truly think our medical science has not fully researched the vagus nerve at all. We think we have, but we haven't.
There's of course a big spiritual connection to breath too. I mean that God breathed life into us and into his creation. That's it's such a powerful image anyway. That there are spiritual aspects to breathing as well as the physical ones. Let's talk about in your book you talk about learning changes and you talk about abstracting.
Learning reversals. This is happened so many times that I would venture to say that it is part of the near-death experience. Most of these children come back abstracting. they're abstracting before, many of them before the age of 2, certainly by 4 years of age. You betcha by, 6 or 7 years old when they're starting school. Let me give you an example. This is a boy, part of my research base. This is a boy in the state of Georgia who's in the first grade, who drowns about halfway through. And when he's finally able to come back into school, now step aside here and think, what are they reading in the first grade? See, Spot, Run. Dick and Jane. You got it?
Yes, I remember.
This kid comes back reading Greek mythology and understands it, and goes up to his teacher and says, why was the book Robinson Crusoe ever written? What are you going to do with this kid? There is no school in the United States that is prepared for a first grader who is abstracting. They're not prepared. They're coming in with conceptual reasoning styles that most of us don't get until our late teens or 20s. These are little kids that are already doing it. With learning in school, we call it concrete learning. In other words, you go from detail to detail to detail, and you get harder and harder up the grades. These are kids that are coming in with, conceptual reasoning styles. They've already got it. So they have to relearn or be introduced to concrete learning. And it mixes up the kids, it mixes up the parents, and it just, the teachers go through a real shock here. How are we going to handle this kid? And this is normal. And another thing that's normal with these children is synesthesia. Synesthesia is a condition of the limbic system in the brain whereby it is either somehow enlarged or changed. And I say to everybody that the limbic system is changed for most people during a near-death experience. That I can say with adults to some extent, with children to a large extent. So what's synesthesia? Synesthesia changes your sensing. It changes it into multiples. So I'll give you another example.
Okay.
This is me. This is myself. I was born this way. No, I didn't have a near-death experience at birth, but I came in with synesthesia. I came in with dyslexia and synesthesia. So in the first grade, I was the only kid in class who could smell numbers, see music, and I smell colors. Excuse me. I could smell colors, see music, and hear numbers. I spent most of the first grade on a tall stool in front of the class wearing a conical hat that said dunce on it as an example of a bad child who told lies. The principal tried twice to get me kicked out of school. The first grade for me was nightmare trauma city. And after the first grade, because I knew I was telling the truth.
Yes.
But everybody else thought I was lying. So after the first grade, I decided I would never trust an adult again. So I became exceedingly independent.
Well, and you say that one of the typical after effects is that 90% in the study did not bond with their parents. They bonded with the other side instead.
Let's stop for a minute because that is so big. 90% do not bond with their parents. That does not mean that they don't love them, but it does mean that they won't necessarily listen to them. They won't necessarily respect them. They won't necessarily follow what the parents want them to do because either they know their parent is wrong, or they can see through the mind and they know what their parent is thinking, or they're just different. So we've got 90% that do not bond with parents. Difficult family situations, 82%. The siblings in the family will look at a child near-death experiencer is different. Maybe they even look different. And so the other kids in the family will say, well, where did you come from? Another planet? You don't belong in this family. So you get a lot of that kind of difference. And certainly by the time they're in school, you get an awful lot of that. So, 84% are empathic, 75% highly intelligent. And we get into this intelligence issue. Both books, I really got into intelligence. And the older ones looking back and the younger ones looking forward. You still get into this idea of intelligence. It gets really kind of wild. Drawn to and highly proficient in math, science, and history, 93%. Hold on to your hats here. From birth until 15 years. Now, that was in the first study. But bear in mind, I had hardly any of them that were teens or tweens. They were from 7 years on down to birth. So when they're old enough to take the standard IQ test, 48% are scoring between 150 to 160. If you get younger than 6, 81% are scoring between 150 to 160. Here's the hot hat topper. Birth to 15 months, especially if they had a dark or black light experience. When they're old enough to take an IQ test, that their scores begin at 180 and above.
Whoa.
100%.
Wow.
All of them. The younger the child, the bigger the jump. Now, and I hope there's a lot of scientists listening to this show. I hope there's a lot of doctors listening to this show because we need to research this. This is very, very important. We need to research this. We need to go much further here. But bear in mind now, a lot of these experiences, birth to the age of 5 years, and especially those that are younger, are happening during a time when the basic flooring is being laid in the brain and the nervous system, the digestive system. All that basic flooring is being laid when I call it a power punch. The power punch of the near-death experience is happening during those critical times. I say that when what I've noticed is when that power punch hits, it's flipping the brain into higher octaves. And we've got to research this. We've just got to, because we've got the numbers now.
Yes. Well, in the time we've got left, PMH, I'd like to completely flip the subject. I think of you as a perennial optimist, and yet I know from your newsletter that you're a realist as well when it comes to problems like global warming, for instance. 2 years ago, in your October 2017 newsletter, you wrote, "It's a great time to be alive." Do you still feel that way?
Yeah.
You do. I knew you were going to say yes.
Even more
now,
so.
You also mentioned the Pluto reversal from 2020 to starting next year.
In astrology, it's called a return.
Or a return, that's right.
That's when the planet or the dwarf planet returns to its time in your natal chart. In other words, when you were born, that's the placement of Pluto, and then the necessary 248 years or something has gone by now, and that time again has returned. So it's called, in astrology, it's called a return. You get that with all the different planets and so forth and so on if you're studying an astrological chart. But what's so important to hear, I think, is the Saturn return in the United States chart is between the years 2020 and 2024. Interestingly enough, that's our next presidential term.
Yes.
Now, Pluto means force. It means high energy. It's nothing is ever middle ground during a passage of Pluto. Just incredible energy. So it's either not so good or it's very, very, very good. But again, there's nothing in the middle. There's no middle ground. So if you look at politics right now, is there any middle ground?
No.
You're either top or bottom in whatever you're looking at. So our next presidential election will be the most important in the United States history. Doesn't matter who wins. It's the most important in our history. And we go on from there in major things happening across the world. And I remind everybody, we are in what is known as the Great Shifting. This time that happens every 25,920 years, where everything turns. The whole table, the giant cosmic clock, it's turning on itself. So we're in that high energy, very weird and scary time when what we thought we knew about our globe, our country, where we live, is being altered, and altered significantly. So when we're talking about global changes, when we're talking about weather changes, please know that it is on schedule. It's part of the schedule. It's not just global warming. It's not just all this smoke coming out of the smokestacks. It's not just eating more and more and more of a demand for meat. It is on schedule. Now, certainly these other things we are doing is impacting that, yes, but it's not causing it. We're on schedule for massive changes, and that's exactly what's happening and will continue to happen. And if anybody has an opportunity to read the prophetic changes that have been predicted by near-death experiences, Robert Mays and his wonderful wife Suzanne collected those put them together in a study that was given at the conference. I have a copy of that study, and it's wonderful.
I was at that study. Actually, I had them on the show just before the conference, and then of course I was there. That was a well-attended discussion, and I think it may also be on YouTube now. I think Robert sent me an email saying it was on YouTube. Perhaps I'll try and put it on the show as well, because it was profound.
I would love to have the code or clues or all of that too, because I'd like to put it in the newsletter as well.
Okay.
And by the way,
sure.
remind everybody, my free monthly newsletter.
Yes,
tell
everyone how they can get that.
www.pmhatwater.com. Sign up.
It's wonderful. The breadth of information. I mean, it's certainly not all dedicated to near-death studies. It's got everything in there, and everything that's current and important.
Well, I tell everybody it's a newsletter for the curious.
Yeah. Now, will the magnetic poles be affected by this 25,000 year?
They are. They are changing. So how much of that will affect us? Certainly a lot. We've got a lot of other electrical things that are changing that will affect certainly our electricity, but it's going to affect our websites, Google, Facebook. It will affect our electrical
the power grid.
The power grid, yes.
Very susceptible to solar flares if there's not a strong magnetic protection.
We're going to be getting more, less and more. Again, they're cyclic.
Yes.
But we need to take a look at that. Yes.
Huh. Wow. Do you think
we
that
could go on and on, couldn't we?
Yes, I know we could do a whole show just on this. Do you think NDEers will have a significant impact on protecting the Earth from environmental change?
I think they're going to have a significant impact on helping people realize how powerful they are, how much of a difference their thoughts and deeds make in the world, that everybody is important, and to help people realize how important they are. I think that's really what comes out of the near-death experience, is to realize how important you are, how special you are, how indeed you are a daughter or son of the Most High. If you don't want to use the word God, you don't have to use the word God. But that higher order is real, is effective. We are co-creators with the Creator. And if you don't believe that, pull out the Christian Bible. It says, and I quote, "We are gods in the making." Get the book, A Manual for Developing Humans. Hue is the ancient sound of God. So human is God-man, God-woman. That's what hue is. Who among us are taught how to be a human being in our lives? We're not taught. So get the manual. I wrote it. It's out there.
It teaches, as you said, the goal is not to be a better person, but a full human being.
Yeah,
that's what the manual is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we need.
This has been terrific, PMH. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, it's all the time we have for today.
Okay. Well, we'll do it again next year.
My thanks to PMH Atwater for today's show and for her latest book, The Forever Angels. For more on IANDS, listeners can go back and listen to this show and previous shows by going to the past shows button at the NDE radio site. And for more on IANDS and getting recordings from the conference, please go to IANDS.org. If you'd like to listen to this show again or any of our past shows, as I said, go to our website at nderadio.org and join us again next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. This is Lee Witting saying thanks for listening.